I'm selfish because that feeling of helping and repatriating and bringing a man back to his family and allowing those families now to have closure, man, it's a feeling I never not want to feel. And
Yeah.
it's I tell you what, man, and if you don't shed a tear, if your eyes don't water up with some of these things we do, you're just not human. I always say we're harder than woodpecker lips, but man, I'm not gonna lie, man. I've definitely shed a few tears at some of these funerals because it was so beautiful, and I was just happy to be able to keep America's promise, to bring these guys back home. It took a little while, but we
Yeah.
we brought them home.
What is going on, everyone? Ian Scotto here for Battle Line Podcast. As many of you know, I'm out here on Long Island, New York, as they say, and it's been an interesting time here in New York because everybody got very excited. They were like, "Finally, this drought is over. The New York Knicks are going to go to the NBA Finals," and that did not happen. And I'm not even like that big of a Knicks or basketball guy, but I mean, I got into the hype. I had my friends over here watching the games, or I was going to their houses. It was very exciting. And then, yeah, that all fell apart. But I guess if you're in Oklahoma City or Indiana, congrats to you guys who are watching these games. And then also, of course, we've got the Edmonton Oilers and Florida Panthers against each other in the NHL Stanley Cup Finals. So yeah, I know we're not a sports show, but just interesting stuff going on that front. For those of you wondering, Chris, yeah, he's been out a little bit recently, and he was supposed to be on for this show with John Marsack of Project Recover, and at the very last minute, as many of you know, Chris does a lot of work in terms of his flood insurance adjustment claims work that he talks about a lot on the show and that he's been getting more and more involved in. And yeah, there's stuff going on in the Joplin, Missouri area. It's not too far from him, and they needed some extra hands with that. And so, yeah, that comes first and foremost of helping people out whose homes have been destroyed during flooding and other natural disasters. So our prayers are definitely out to you if this impacts you at all. And Chris is actually doing what he can for those who are impacted with this to make sure that they get the insurance that they're supposed to and get the payout they're supposed to if their homes have been destroyed by these natural disasters. Yeah, John Marsack is on for this episode, co-founder of Project. You know what? Not co-founder of Project Recover. I have that written in my notes, and he's gonna smack me around if I say that again. He is with Project Recover, but he's the co-founder of another organization. You'll see I completely botched the intro on this one. I'm very meticulous with my notes. I'm only human, though. Every now and again, I do mess up things. So, yeah, John Marsack, who is with Project Recover and does the actual diving with his partner, Nick Zaborski. But this is a great episode. I mean, in terms of what they're doing with getting back the remains of guys all the way back to World War II, it's absolutely amazing and unbelievable. I didn't know that it was possible to get any type of remains from people from that many decades ago, but they're proving that they're able to do it and have recovered some remains of several guys in these instances, as you'll hear. They're a great charity, and you know what else is a great charity? The Gwen Doherty Memorial Foundation. And anytime you buy something from Bub's Naturals, you are helping out the Gwen Doherty Memorial Foundation, which helps military families. But you don't just buy from Bub's because they're helping out a great charity. They have the best products on the market. They have the best hydration packets you're going to find, especially if you're like me. You don't want any of that sugary crap. They just have the Himalayan pink salt and all the other stuff you're going to need to get the electrolytes back in your system after you're going for a run in this warmer weather. I'm here once again on Long Island where we're now getting much, much warmer weather. And if you want to go for a run, you're going to be dying of thirst when you get back in, and you could reward yourself with something healthy with those hydrate or die packages, which is still the best name on the market for a hydration packet. Hydrate or die. But once again, their flagship product is always their collagen protein, great for muscle recovery, hair, skin, nails. It is the fountain of youth, and you're going to feel like $1,000,000 after you take it. So go to bubsnaturals.com, use the promo code BATTLELINE, and you'll get 20% off your first purchase just because they love us so much. bubsnaturals.com, promo code BATTLELINE. Let's go.
From Kansas City to New York City, from planet Earth to extraterrestrial life in space, a podcast with no equal, engaged in unconventional warfare through your speakers and headphones. This is a show about embracing the suck, conquering your demons, and finding God in the face of adversity. Chris Tonto Peranto.
Switch is on. Motherfucker, I'm gonna shoot you in the face.
Ian Scotto.
You know, Ian and I have been dating for a long time.
You are now tuned into the Battle Line Podcast.
Switch is on, Battle Line Podcast. I've got John Marsack on with me, co-founder of Project Discover, and he's the co-founder along with Nick Zaborski.
Actually, Ian, let me hold you real quick, dude.
Go for it. Yeah,
it's Project Recover. But let me give you a quick 2 minutes real fast.
Yeah,
so,
sure.
So, all right,
and I don't know why I wrote Discover on here. I'm an idiot. It's funny because I have the website on here. It's projectrecover.com, and I don't even know how I got that. Okay.
Yeah.
For the audience, I'm not even cutting this out. You guys could be like, you are a moron, Ian.
Dude, we're both in the same boat, man. Let me give you a little essay here. So Nick and I are members of Project Recover. We are members of that nonprofit organization. What Nick and I are co-founders of is my company, Legion Undersea Services. So how we got involved with Project Recover was that they were originally a terrestrial. They were doing solely terrestrial work for the MIA, POW MIA recovery work, but they wanted to get into into the water world where a lot of these crashes happened, in World War II and stuff, and they didn't have a diving asset. Well, it's crazy because we did the same mission in the military, and now we're doing it again as civilians. So basically, it's John Marsack and Nick Zaborski, co-founders of Legion Undersea Service.
Sure.
Legion Undersea Services, which what we are is a commercial diving company. We're a commercial diving company that specializes in POW MIA recovery. And that's how the union between Project Recover and Legion started. And I got that story to tell you guys, so we can roll into that. But just for your essay, we are Legion Undersea Services, who are partnered and are members of Project Recover nonprofit organization.
Got it. No, that's perfect. And I said, I don't know why I wrote Project Discover. I know you guys are Project Recover. I'm just typing up the notes here, and then But what I do have correct, I know, is that you're a former Navy diver, as Nick is a former Navy diver. And I was originally going to have both you guys on because Ben Morgan, who runs Tonto Vodka, ran into you guys and told me, I think way back in January, he was like, you got to get these guys on the show. And the thing that happens is basically every week it's just I'm inundated with guests, and I'm like, I will get to it. And I thought I think he figured I forgot about you guys, which I did not, but I finally had some time to do it. And as I said, at some point it would be cool to have Nick on. But anyway, just to show the audience that I'm not a complete idiot, I have looked into what you guys do in terms of remains for POWs, rescuing, that type of stuff. And going back to World War II, which in itself, truthfully, I would love to know the whole story of, because it is a little confusing, because when you hear about that you dive to rescue the remains of POWs from World War II, the obvious thing that comes to mind for me is like, well, what's left of any of those guys? What remains are left to be discovered? So yeah, I would love to hear just from a, total layman's point of view, what is it that you guys are rescuing?
So a lot of people ask that same question. A lot of people, ask is what is left down there. So obviously, if we're going after the remains of these heroes from World War II, we're looking at these heroes have been underwater now for going on 80 to 81 years. And at that point, obviously, there's not going to be much left except for the bones of these heroes. And when we're fortunate enough to recover their dog tags, collar devices, wedding rings on occasions, personal effects, things of that nature. So when we're going down there, and our guys now through the military and with our experience with Project Recover over the last 4 years, we've gained a lot of really valuable archaeological experience. Although we're not archaeologists, we're the divers. We're trained by the Defense POWMIA Accounting Agency archaeologists on how to recognize and locate the remains of these service members underwater. The thing is, a lot of people, they always ask, like, well, what do you do? Do you bring up the whole plane with these guys in there or whatever? No, man. It is a very rough process down there, because if you can picture this in your mind, an aircraft that hit the water doing anywhere from 100 to 300 miles an hour, due to the fact that it was shot down with anti-aircraft fire or by another plane or whatever, these very high impacts to the water. By the time we get down there, you wouldn't even know it's an airplane unless you knew it was an airplane. The thing basically looks like a big crushed up beer can that's got barnacles and everything all over it. It looks like a beer can that's been underwater for 80 years. And when we go down there, our only goal is to find the remains. The aircraft itself means nothing to us. We actually go down there and we do a lot of cutting and tearing the aircraft apart to get to the remains that are normally located somewhere around where the fuselage used to be on the aircraft, or somewhat around that area. And it's a very destructive phase when we first go down there to get into these aircraft, but we do it very delicately, because the last thing we want to do is destroy, hurt, or damage any of the remains, because the remains have been down there, like I said, going on about 80 years now. We're almost getting to that point now where these remains may not even have any recoverable DNA left in them, because when we recover the remains, it's a very strict chain of custody with the archaeologists and the DPAA. The DPAA stands for the Defense POWMIA Accounting Agency, who is actually the ones in charge of dispatching us and approving these missions that are given to Project Recover. So these bones and the personal effects that we get from these crash sites are all turned over to the DPAA, and these remains, they go back to the Central Processing Lab, Central ID Lab in Pearl Harbor, Hawaii, which is located on Hickam Air Force Base. And then they go through the painstaking process of putting these things through the DNA testing, which is really how we find out exactly who those remains belong to. And the process, of actually getting down there, the process of the recovery starts years, sometimes even decades before we even get down there. Look, Legion Undersea Services, which is my company, Nick and I's company, that have partnered with Project Recover, we're like batting cleanup. To use a baseball analogy, we are the guys that come in at the very end when we know exactly what crash site it is, we know exactly what airplane it is, and we know exactly who was on that aircraft. So all of this work is done way prior to us getting in the water by Project Recover and their staff, their historians who have access to naval archives and the U.S. Navy and the DoD itself as a whole. They all work together to combine all of this information to give us the best possible spot to start looking for these. Because when it first starts off, we're running off of historical military records. Project Recover, who also partners with Scripps Institute of Oceanography and the University of Delaware, these two organizations were the ones that brought in the technology into the Project Recover organization. Because before they came along, it was a very rudimentary ways of trying to find these aircraft underwater. So much so that back in the day, they literally used to hang on to the side of a boat with a scuba mask and have that boat drag them around. And they were like, "Hey, wait,
was that effective at all?"
Not so much.
Yeah, I wouldn't think so.
They
like, what are you going to see? You're going to see like surface level fish.
Well, in the areas that they're working at back in the day, they would have to do it in depths that were the water out there in the Pacific normally is where we're concentrating on right now with most of our water missions. The visibility is beautiful, somewhere around 100 feet, so if you're in less than 100 feet of water, you can see very clearly. So these guys are going down, picking things up. They're like, "Oh, I think this is something." They're like, "Nah, buddy, that's a conch shell." But to the layman, you don't know, right? Because everything underwater looks like, it looks like it should be there. So these guys are just doing their best. But they finally found out that, like, hey, man, if we're really going to move forward and do this the right way, we're going to have to recruit some people in here with some technology that really know what they're doing. And that's when Scripps Institute of Oceanography and University of Delaware were brought in. And actually, in 2018, Project Recover's former name was the Bent Prop Project. And these were a group of guys founded by a man named Dr. Pat Scannon. So he basically got all of his crazy buddies together who were all skydivers, divers, and just living the extreme limits of life. He got them all together to start going around and looking for these POWMIAs, which we can get into a little bit more in detail later. But from there, once he brought in those two other organizations, they decided to change the name to Project Recover, since this was a collaborative group now of 3 different entities. They rebranded it, the name of the organization, in 2018 to Project Recover. And from there, they went from holding onto a side of a boat, looking with a scuba mask, to deploying underwater autonomous vehicles and ROVs that could comb hundreds of square kilometers in a mission, looking for those targets underwater. And then once they would come back to the hotels and go over the data, they would find all of these marks. So then the following day, they would go out in a boat and they would scuba dive on these marks if they're within about 100 feet or so, and they would identify them. Most of the time, it's nothing. Most of the time, it's coral. Sometimes it's an old boat wreck. So it's a little discouraging, but you got to understand that going into it. Once they started doing that, when they would get down there and they would find these aircraft and they would find something on there, a placard, something with some kind of writing on it. In the very, very rare occasions, you might even still, back in the earlier days, you might even be able to get a tail number or something off of it. But really all we need is some kind of number off of that aircraft, and we can reverse engineer that back and find out exactly what aircraft it was, what ship it was from, and who was on it. And then once we start from there, or once we get that information, that's when the ball starts rolling in this whole collaborative effort of Project Recover, the DoD, the volunteers, that's when that all kicks in, and we start moving forward and trying to bring these guys home.
All right, guys, we do not talk shooting on this episode, but we are always a podcast that celebrates hunting, shooting, and you're going to need the best ammo out there when it comes to home defense, when it comes to shooting at the range. And the great thing about Fort Scott Munitions is they do have great defense ammo, home defense ammo for whatever you're shooting with. And then they also have range ammo for that. So they've got you covered on all ends. They've got all types of great merch on the site, tins. They really just, they're constantly putting new stuff on the site. So like, if you haven't been on the site in a while, go there. You're going to find new stuff, new t-shirts, new tins. Fort Scott Munitions is a manufacturer of multi-federal patented solid copper and brass CNC spun ammunition that is designed to tumble upon impact. Their trademark in soft tissue, leaving devastating wound channels for faster bleed out and quicker incapacitation. This ammunition was originally developed to innovate and improve on the standard of military-grade ammunition design. It was found that not only did the TUI ammunition outperform competitors in the self-defense industry, but it quickly became apparent that it would be a top contender for hunters alike. With the ammunition being CNC spun, the tolerances are some of the tightest on the market, ensuring that you receive the same results with each pull of the trigger. Fort Scott Munitions is available throughout privately owned businesses in all 50 states, but you're going to get the best deal through us when you go to FSM.com and you use the promo code BATTLELINE. You'll get 15% off select merchandise when you go to FSM.com and you use that promo code BATTLELINE, one word, just like the podcast. Link is in the description. Fort Scott Munitions is a proud supporter of Chris Peranto, Battleline Tactical, and the Battleline podcast. One thing we do talk about on this episode is how amazing the technology is now in terms of diving, right? I mean, things are always innovating in terms of stuff that's being used in tactical situations or even in their case, diving. But I wanted to relate that to Photonus Defense because every time we have those guys on, Sean Kirk and Phil Otto, you learn that there are really new innovations coming in the night vision space faster than you can believe, and they're at the forefront of it. Now you can have the superpower to see in the dark with the Viper Binocular Night Vision System by Photonus Defense, the global leader in night vision solutions, providing more high-quality night vision capabilities than anyone. Military, law enforcement, and public safety end users utilize Photonus Defense solutions to give them the edge at night in tactical situations and rescue operations. Hunters, shooters, boaters, and enthusiasts can rely on the Photonus Defense Viper Binocular to become masters of darkness. The new Viper Binocular system carries the same features and benefits as the Photonus Defense Viper Binocular, with a ruggedized body, and harnesses the power of the Echo Intensifier tubes, giving you sharper images, reduced halo, and industry-leading ultra-fast auto-gating across the range of dynamic operating conditions. Visit PhotonusDefense.com for more information or look for Photonus Defense product options from your night vision dealer. Very simple. It's PHOTONIS Defense.com, PHOTONIS Defense.com. The link for that is in the description of the episode. With that, let's get back to John Marsack from Project Recover. Wow, man. Well, I appreciate you going really in depth with how it works because, yeah, there's a lot of components there. When I first heard about the organization, yeah, you just think it's these two guys going into the ocean. How are they ever going to discover anything? So this brings a little bit more clarity. I'm wondering, just in like the really, really early stages, how did they have any idea where to look? I mean, I know that you're saying they scour these giant areas, but I mean, most of Earth's surface is water. It's like, how do they even have any idea of like remotely where on the map they're going to?
So back in the day, World War II era, when these guys were up in the air, dogfighting, doing bombing missions and whatnot, if one of our brothers were shot down during one of those engagements or one of those missions, there would be multiple aircraft in the air at one time. So they would always make sure that if they did see a plane get hit and going down, other aircraft that were on the mission would mark that and get a general Latin long and location of where that plane went down, whether it was in the water, on land, if they saw parachutes, if the men got out in time. A lot of the time they didn't. So all of this information comes from historical records. So when the crew would fly back to the aircraft carrier and land, their debriefs afterwards involved identifying casualties in the air, debriefing during their hot wash, who it was, what plane it was. So we have this very large archive through the military that we comb through, and Project Recover has some excellent people, historians that have basically unlimited access to the records, the unclassified records of these missions. So once they take a look at that, really what happens is that a group of people at DPAA determine whether or not that there's a high probability of recovering remains or not. And if they do decide that, yeah, you know what, this is a worthwhile site. It went down in an area that's anywhere from 100, 150 feet and shallower, which us divers can get to these days. They basically take all of this stuff into consideration, and they're like, you know what? Let's make this a mission. Let's reach out to our partners in the Partnership and Innovation division of DPAA, and let's see if these guys will help out. So from that point, that's when they reach out to DPAA, to Project Recover, which, to be honest with you, Project Recover has done a ton, has provided the DoD and the DPAA with a lot of their information. So when they go back and they look at this information, it's coming right from Project Recover. So then they turn around, give the mission back to them. Project Recover calls us, and then we're back in. So, but that's basically it in a nutshell. From the historic military records is where we first start our search for the men that went down.
How successful have they been in terms of actually finding things?
Well, we've been pretty successful. Project Recover has been around since 1993. And, well, I'm sorry, the Bent Prop Project has been around since 1993. But historically, over 30 years, the organization has been, together. And on their website, if you go to projectrecover.org, they have all this information on there, and it's pretty astounding how many people they've brought back. Don't quote me here. Definitely go to the website and check it out. But I want to say Project Recover is responsible for repatriating about 15 men so far, and by 15
men you mean like everything from like a dog tag, like you said, or just some type of remains, right?
I'm talking about recoverable remains that were 100% identified by DNA testing. So when they get those, so as far as like success goes, you have to think about the vastness of the oceans. You just said it. It's like looking for a needle in a haystack.
Even more. I mean, it's even crazier than that when you really think. It's the entire ocean.
It's the smallest needle in the biggest haystack, right? Yeah. Well, from a grassroots organization, which Project Recover is, it's really astounding that they have recovered that many people. And also just with their investigative work over the years, there are literally hundreds of cases still waiting to be to go out and be searched for, which we're still waiting for approval on. But again, it has to go through that process. But at the end of the day, if Project Recover was only ever to bring home one person, it would totally be worth it. But that's not the case, thank goodness. And we're gonna continue this, and until we can, just bring home every single guy we can. I'm, not to toot our own horn or anything like that, but since Legion Undersea Services has been partner with Project Recover, man, we're batting 1,000. We've recovered remains, identifiable remains on every single mission that we've been on.
That's awesome.
And I think the reason behind our success is that my co-founder, Nick Zaborski, him and I, when we put the company together, we really wanted to make sure that the men that we brought into this organization, Legion Undersea Services, that was going to help us do this, they had to be the absolute top caliber people in the world. And all right, I am a little biased. When I mean top caliber people in the world, I'm talking about Navy divers. And it was pretty easy, to be honest with you, because we just hired all of our friends, that we served, in the military with, and had put our lives in their hands, for decades. We figured, well, hey guys, we got a few more missions to do. So we brought this really eclectic group of divers together that are really passionate about this, because when you leave the service, you can ask any military member this, and everybody knows when you leave the military, if you don't have something lined up that is kind of within the wheelhouse of what you did when you were in the military member, he loses his mission. That's the best way to put it. For decades, we have had a mission to do.
Yeah.
And now that we left, everybody's like, oh, I did 20 years in the military, man. I'm going to sit on a fishing boat. I'm done. I'm retired, right? Well, that's exactly what my business partner, Nick, thought he was going to do. And then after about 6 months of doing that, he was crawling the walls, going nuts, wanting to do something. And the reason why is because he didn't have a mission anymore. He had everything he needed. We both had everything we needed. The military provided us the opportunity to have everything that we have today. We technically don't need to work if we don't want to, but it's that loss of mission and that lack of service now, that we're not helping anybody anymore. We're not serving anybody in a capacity that we used to in the military. And for every one of the guys on Legion Undersea Services dive team, that's the same thing that happened. And as we started bringing these guys together, the story was the same. And like, hey man, are you tired of just sitting around the house? Like, we should be doing something. And I think I got something for us. So, and then as we reached out, we started to bring, we've got some Army guys on the team. I got a A1 Abrams tank commander on my team. I got a couple First Bat Ranger boys on the team. We just got a very wide array of experience in different military cultures on this team. And that's what makes it so, it just makes it so well put together that, Army guys and Navy guys, they think a little bit differently. Air Force guys, Marine guys, they think a little bit differently. So when we bring us all together as one, oh man, it's like putting together the Voltron from back in the day. We all kind of just, stack together to make this big, giant POWMIA recovery effort. And we just go out there and do it. And man, to this day, I tell you what, I'm selfish, because that feeling of helping and repatriating and bringing a man back to his family and allowing those families now to have closure, man, it's a feeling I never not want to feel. And I tell you what, man, and if you don't shed a tear, if your eyes don't water up with some of these things we do, you're just not human. I always say we're harder than woodpecker lips, but man, I'm not gonna lie, man. I've definitely shed a few tears at some of these funerals because it was so beautiful, and I was just happy to be able to keep America's promise, to bring these guys back home. It took a little while, but we brought them home.
So you've been a part of that process of when you get to say to family members, hey, here's what we found.
So no, so how that happens is when we go out there, the beautiful thing the family members don't even know we are looking for their loved ones, because the last thing we ever want to do is
Disappoint them. Yeah.
give a Gold Star family false hope.
Sure.
So they never even know we're looking for them. Uh, they start to get a sense when they get a call and they are asked for a DNA sample, little cheek swab, and they're like, oh, that's
Sure.
strange, but the families know that the DPAA is, consistently working on bringing, trying to help them identify their family members and where they're at. But how that process works is when we recover remains, they go to the DPAA archaeologists. Those remains are either flown back by the archaeologists, or they have a team fly out to wherever we're at in the world to take custody of those remains and fly them back to either Hawaii or Nebraska, which are the two central ID labs that are in the continental United States right now. And so from there, when they positively identify them, matching DNA between the family member and the remains, the DPAA are the ones who identify, or who let the family members know that their loved ones have been recovered. And so then that starts the process of, them planning the funeral and whatnot. And then on those rare occasions that we are invited back to the funerals, it's a very touching and moving moment. And we try to stay as far in the back as possible. We're just there out of respect for the family, and it never ceases that the family members come up. Every single person there thanks us, and it does get really emotional. When you're there, it's just so beautiful to see a family have closure, after 80 years. Grandpa, it's either grandpa or dad or uncle or whatever picture that was on the mantle for all the years. Like when you were little, you're like, hey, who's that on the mantle right there? Oh, that's Grandpa John. Well, what happened to Grandpa John? He died in World War II. Well, what happened? Well, he was shot down in the Pacific somewhere. That's all we really know.
Yeah.
And back in the day, that's all they had to tell you.
Sure.
Remember, you got the yellow Western Union letter that says, United States Army or Navy regrets to inform you that your son, husband, whoever the case may be, was killed in action, or is a POW MIA on or around this time, and maybe a general location. And that's all they got, because there wasn't no Freedom of Information Act back then. The families got what they got. And now, it's not like that these days, but man, to be able to see the family finally close the book, finalize that chapter in their life. It's just a beautiful thing to see, man. And I just want to continue to do it as long as I'm able.
Yeah, it's awesome. And like I said, I appreciate you going in depth with how the whole process works, because there's a lot of components there. It'd be cool to get into your background, man. I mean, how did you get into becoming a Navy diver? What inspired you to join? Were you someone who always thrived in the water? I'd love to hear all about that.
Well, nothing special here, man. I'm just a punk kid from Detroit, Michigan.
Oh, wow.
So I kind of grew up around the water there in the Great Lakes, swimming like a fish, from a young age, and was always drawn to water. But never, never diving didn't come into my life until I joined the military. But I was always drawn to the water, and we. Growing up, I'd come from a, lower middle class. If there was such thing as upper lower class, that's actually really the way I explain myself. But, a good loving family, coming up. I was in sports a lot, grew up football, basketball, baseball, hockey, anything I could get my hands on to try to keep me out of trouble. For the times that I wasn't getting in trouble, I was playing sports and, doing stuff of that nature. but just growing up, loving life, always knew I was going to join the military from a young age. I was one of those, '80s kids that grew up watching GI Joe and the A Team and all those classic hit shows back in the day that kind of drove you to the military. And come high school, man, I knew towards the end, I was kind of like a B, C student, somewhere around there. Just enough, keeping the grades just high enough to be able to play sports. But I was bored, wasn't really interested in too much except for history. History was kind of cool, which again kind of leads down that military path.
Sure.
But yeah, man, I was in the delayed entry program in 11th grade. As soon as I graduated 11th grade, I went to the delayed entry program for the Navy. And I think it was 3 months after I graduated high school, my butt was on a bus to Great Lakes, Illinois, and starting boot camp. So, and then, I didn't start off as a Navy diver when I first got into the military.
Sure.
I started off like every other, squid, had to go find a job. I was a interior communications electrician. So I was basically your phone guy. I was the phone guy, on the ship and on the bases and stuff. So, fast forward probably about 6 years, I've been in the Navy, and I find myself stationed in Roosevelt Roads, Puerto Rico. Beautiful place. Base is decommissioned now, which is very unfortunate because, man, that place was gorgeous. And, I always explain it. Yeah, I just started hanging around the wrong guys. My buddy was a Navy diver, lived right next to me. And I'd always see those guys partying and, and stuff. So I'd go over there. And so I initially just started, hanging out and partying with those guys. And I seemed to click just, perfectly with these guys. And, so they started asking me, hey, my last name's Marsack, so everybody, called me Sack back in the day. So that was my nickname. So they're like, Sack, why don't you go to dive school, man? And I was like, well, yeah, maybe, and, the more I hung around with them and stuff, and I got into the culture and found out more of what Navy diving, had to offer, I just was like, yeah, you know what? Yeah, this is the move for me. And all right, I'll be honest to everybody listening. First time I saw a Navy diver not in the water, he was cruising around the base in shorts and a T-shirt and Tevas. And I was like, what in the hell? Who is that guy? And how do I get to wear a uniform like that?
Yeah.
So I engaged with him, and I was like, you wear that every day? He's like, yeah, man, we don't wear no uniforms, except for when we're in trouble. And I was like, man, I could really get behind that. So that was another little thing right there that kind of drew me towards it. And wound up putting in my package, got accepted to Navy Dive School about 2003 time frame, and second class dive school. Went through that, graduated as a second class diver in the United States Navy, and shipped off to my first dive locker, which was a ship's husbandry command in Jacksonville, Florida, Mayport, Florida, and started fixing ships for the Navy. And that's kind of the way it started off. From a punk Detroit kid to Navy diver early in his career.
Yeah, what made you realize you had the skill for it, though? Because it's more than just being a strong swimmer. I mean, you have to have a special talent that very few others have.
Yeah, well, I was always very comfortable in and under the water, jumping in the water, diving down in Puerto Rico about 20 feet into a reef, ripping out a lobster, getting dinner for the night, doing a little bit of spear fishing. I was just always very, very comfortable under the water and being around the water. And then once I saw these guys and what they did, I was like, oh man, and I was like, that is unbelievable. Because, at first I asked the same question. I'm like, well, what do you guys do? You divers, you kind of just, go underwater, look for stuff. What do you do? And then they educated me. It's like, oh, well, yeah, we go underwater and pick stuff up like airplanes and helicopters and ships and, unfortunately, people every once in a while, as part of the job as well, but that's the salvage side of the house. And then you got your ship's husbandry where you go around and you're fixing Navy ships while they're still in the water. You're saving the Navy, millions of dollars putting that ship into dry dock and having to do it there. And I fell in love with ship's husbandry, man, because you know what? You want to know what my first job as a Navy diver when I checked into Mayport, Florida, it was a dual propeller change out on the USS John F. Kennedy aircraft carrier. We swapped out these props off the aircraft carrier, and these things weigh about 32 tons. Don't quote me on the exacts. And they're about, I don't know, 20 feet tall. And these things are massive. And we took those things off underwater, brought it to the surface, got another one, put it down in there. We worked 24 hours a day for a month on this job. And at the end of the day, when you sat there and you looked at what you did at the end of that month period, you're like, my God, man, I just changed out a propeller on an aircraft carrier. So it's amazing, and then, from ship's husbandry, you also move into your special operations, or I'm sorry, special warfare side of the house. So Navy divers, Navy EOD, and Navy SEALs. Well, I'm sorry, Navy divers and EOD were Navy special operations. Navy SEALs are special warfare. But with divers, we augment EOD lockers and SEAL platoons, whether it's SEAL teams or the SDV teams, whatever the case may be. We're normally a dive rep, or in the case of the SDV teams, which are the SEAL delivery vehicle unit teams, we play a very large role in deploying the SDVs out of the dry deck shelters that are attached onto the back of the submarines. Have you ever seen a submarine that looks like it's got a little baby like black Twinkie on its back?
I don't know, to be honest. Yeah, I'm not sure.
Yeah, next time if you look that up, sometimes you'll see two of them on there. Those are dry deck shelters which house the SDVs. So the Navy divers' job on that case is to deploy the SDV and the SEAL team members that are on there. We get them out of the dry deck shelter, deployed off and onto their mission while the submarine is moving underwater. We're doing all this as the submarine's moving underwater. We get those guys underway. They go do their hoo-yah stuff, come on back. We bring them back in, lock them back in, get back into the sub, and we call it a day. So there's a very broad spectrum when it comes to the jobs of Navy divers. So, and that's something that I really enjoy because I tend to get bored easy. I like to do things. I like to master them, and then I like to move on to the next thing. I'm never really satisfied with. I don't know. Once you become a subject matter expert on something, you want to become a subject matter expert on another thing, and then another thing. So that's just the way most of the mindset of special operations guys go. And, even when you're an old guy, 50 years old, like myself, it still continues, it never gets old.
For sure, man. So what advice would you have for like the younger generation who sees what you've done and they're like, I want to go into that. I want to be a Navy diver.
Well, you got to be super confident in and around the water. That's the number one thing. You definitely cannot be claustrophobic. I've seen some of the guys I've seen some people put on our dive helmets because Navy divers, we do scuba, closed circuit rigs, bubbleless rebreathers. And then we do surface supply diving as well, and also saturation diving. But we're talking putting on the helmet on your head. And I've seen people put that on their head and freak out. Get it off, get it off, get it off. They're, like, man, I didn't even know I was claustrophobic until I put that thing on. But to me, that thing's like putting on a football helmet. And I feel so safe with that thing on my head. And that's another thing that goes into this, because Navy divers find themselves in some very, very compromising positions underwater. Every once in a while, wind up getting trapped underwater. You may have to have a buddy come down and get you. So,
You ever have a shark encounter?
oh yeah, yeah, yeah.
Wow. Okay.
Sharks are all over the place down there. But this is what I tell everybody. Sharks are smart creatures. And they're just curious. They want to come up, see what's going on. And half the time when Navy divers are underwater, we're making noise. There's bubbles coming out of our helmets, out of the regulators. These are things that undersea animals don't hear or see a lot. So if you make enough noise, they just tend to stay away from you underwater. But
Maybe because I'm thinking. Do you know? I haven't had him on this show, but when I worked at SOFREP, I interviewed Paul DeGelder. I don't know if you're familiar with him. He's done stuff on Shark Week, but he's an Australian vet, an Australian diver, and yeah, he's a double amputee man. Lost his arm and leg in a shark attack.
Yeah, no. Well, listen, it definitely depends on where you're diving. Like, you're not going to catch me diving in Sydney Harbor anytime soon. Not at all. But you go dive in Pearl Harbor. Not a lot of people know Pearl Harbor is a breeding ground for hammerhead sharks. So the hammerheads, they go up the channel and they go up into like Westlock, there's not much boat traffic and stuff anymore with the ships. That's where the ships back in the day used to go and do all their ammo unloads and stuff like that. But so they migrate all the way up there, and they have their pups and stuff in Pearl Harbor. And every once in a while, you'll see a big boy rolling by. And don't get me wrong, I'm not saying that I'm not afraid of sharks or anything like that. I just have a very healthy respect for anything that's in the water, because I figure they probably treat people like I treat people. I give everybody 100% respect until they give me a reason not to. And I kind of figure that's a shark's mindset as well. So,
That's cool, man. I would be scared shitless personally, but yeah, I'm not, I don't have the experience of you, but that's awesome, man. So yeah, it's you said projectrecover.org. I remember when I was at projectrecover.com doing the notes. I think it just leads you to the same place.
I believe it does.
Yeah, I actually saw your social media, and I saw Project Recover on Instagram, but I also saw that you guys haven't been active for a while. So like, should people follow you on social media? Like, is it just projectrecover.org or anywhere else? Just whatever you want to plug, get it out there.
Well, yeah, really, I'll be honest with you, we don't do the best job right now, social wise, and we're going to be doing a lot better job with that in the future. But we are, anything that takes away from the mission mindset. Really what we're trying to do as far as like social media and stuff goes is obviously to try to get the word out. We need to do a better job at it. And again, we will. But coming on podcasts like this, the main thing that a lot of people ask is like, well, how, I've never heard of this before. I've never heard of it. And, and that's when we tell people to go on back to either projectrecover.org. You can find Project Recover on Instagram, Facebook, and also if you're looking at our company, Legion Undersea Services, all the same social platforms you can find us on. We've got some pretty cool pictures on there from some of the missions. And
yeah, I
and
saw all
whatnot.
that. But I was just that's why I didn't even write it on the prep, because I was like, oh, there hasn't been anything posted in like a year. So I was like, are they using these? I don't know. I'll ask.
Yeah. We, like I said, we need to do a better job, but we focus a lot when we're not actually on the mission. You have to understand that, there's months prior planning, a lot of meetings, traveling overseas, going overseas to do just a recon on the site that we're going to be diving, sending the Advon team out there to kind of get everything laying flat as far as permits and all the things that we have to do in these host countries that we work out of. So yeah, there will be a lot more things coming up soon with that, because we have an unbelievable photog on our team, brother of ours. His name's Chris Perez. He's he is the magic behind all the photos that you see. And he's an old combat photog from back in the day. He's had an incredible Navy career. He's a Legion team member, also a Project Recover team member. And he's the guy, kind of like the old school Stars and Stripes. It's like, hey, that's Chris Perez. He'll make you famous, So his talent absolutely delivers National Geographic quality photos. And we've also, along with that, we've had a few embedded reporters on a few of the missions with us. As a matter of fact, in our mission to Palau in 2023, we had an embedded reporter from the Smithsonian who wrote a pretty good piece on the whole Project Recover team. Maybe I'll tell you a little bit more about it a time later, but he describes me very uniquely in that article, and it's kind of funny, kind of going along the sailor's mouth type of thing, and I am a sailor at heart. I do try to calm the language when I can, but he was out there embedded with us. So this is an operational setting. So, I'm talking to my guys the exact same way I'd talk to them in the military and stuff. So he picked up on that, and the way he describes it is very articulate, and I really appreciate he did it.
That's awesome, man. Well, I appreciate you coming on, John. I know, like I said, originally it was going to be you and Nick and Chris. And Chris is working the flood claim stuff because that's what he does outside of all this. So I was glad we were at least able to make this happen because I was like scrambling at the last minute. And the audience will appreciate it because if John wasn't on, I would run another best of. And although the best of are good, I think the audience give us a new episode. So we do have a new episode here, projectrecover.org. I think we've covered a lot here. I don't know if there's anything that we're missing. If so, get it out there.
Well, no, I think we've scratched the surface on some of this.
Sure.
There's a lot of unique stories that I'd like to share with you, but I think a better time to do that would be towards the end of the year once we return from our mission in Palau, and when I have Nick sitting next to me, we really feed off each other well. We're best friends. I was the best man in his wedding. So it just made sense for us to, start a company together and stuff. But when we're together, a lot of the stuff I forget, I remember a lot of the stuff that he forgets, and there will just be a lot more content available and a fresh mission in our head. And hopefully we can let you know that we won't be able to let you know if we're successful from that mission because that's DPAA's job, but we'll definitely be able to tell you about some cool stuff that happened on the mission.
Here's where I'm really going to sound like an idiot because I am not good with geography. Where is Palau?
So Palau is in Micronesia. So I
don't know where that is either.
Micronesia, that is the far South Pacific. So when we're over there, we're closer to the Philippines and Australia than we are anywhere else. So most of the places that we'll talk about are those little islands that the U.S. was going up and taking over en route to get to Japan to try to end it for World War II. So that's where a lot of our recovery work is these days.
Okay. Well, I do know that area because our video editor is from the Philippines. So shout out to Harold, who's editing this whole thing. But yeah, man, I appreciate it. Thanks for coming on. And we'll speak to you after that mission happens.
Sounds like a plan. Thanks, Ian. I appreciate you.
Awesome, man. Thank you.
That's all for this episode of Battle Line Podcast. But we're always posting new content on social media. Follow us on Instagram at Battleline Podcast and on Twitter at Battleline Pod. That's an order. Be sure to subscribe so you don't miss any new episodes up every Tuesday. Leave us a review on Apple Podcasts or your podcast platform of choice. Believe in yourself. Face all challenges head on. And as always, never quit.